Okay, so this is a second idea in Garageband, and the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to do an empty project. So normally, since this project requires you to start with a drum beat, normally if you needed a drum beat to play along to, the drummer track would be fantastic, and I would say certainly go ahead and use that. But for this particular project, part of the goal is to actually be able to enter in musical information into Garageband in a different way. So don't use the drummer track for this one. I want you to use a software instrument for this one. And you hit create. Now this will default to this classic electric piano, which is a cool little sound. And in fact, even if you don't have a MIDI controller hooked up, one of the cool things about Garageband is you can go to Window and you can go to Show Musical Typing. So one of the cool things that happens here is you get the ability to use the typing keyboard as a MIDI controller. So the chords, the individual notes. You can also change octaves with the X key. The Z key takes you back down. And you can do all kinds of things with it. In any case, the point is you've got some control here. The bigger issue we've got, I'm going to click off of this for a moment. The bigger issue we've got here is we need a drum beat, and that electric piano is cool, but it's not drums. So we need to change that. So we're going to go into the library, and if the library is not visible, then you're going to want to go here to this little file box. So if you see that, for example, click on that little file box in the upper left corner, and now you have your library. Now this is kind of narrow. I can widen it if I want, and then I can see subcategories a little easier. But if it's narrow, you still have a scroll bar here at the bottom, and you can get to your primary instrument selections here. So we select drum kit, and I'm going to do Southern California because that's the one I have that happens to be loaded on this computer here right now. And now if I go back in to my musical typing keyboard, if I'm in the correct octave, I get a kick drum on A, and I get a snare on S, and here's all of my various bits and pieces here. So the good news here is that I've got the information I need. I should mention that I've assumed that you've saved things correctly. I'm going to assume that you know how to deal with things like setting up the audio interface if you're using it, or the built-in output if you're just using headphones connected directly. But the point is hopefully everything is making sense here. The basics of this is just to get this drum kit in is what the purpose of this video is. By the way, if you're not sure what anything in GarageBand does, there's a really cool little helpful tool. It's up in the left here. It's next to the library file cabinet, and it's called the Quick Help button. If you click on it, the little question mark, it turns yellow, and it starts to show you anything you point at what it does. That's the library, this is our rewind button, our forward button, and so on, and it kind of shows you everything. It's pretty cool. Everything comes up and tells you what they do, tells you how to make use of them in a lot of cases. But it can also get a little distracting just because that that yellow bubble keeps showing up. So I'm going to turn it off for now, and we're not going to worry about that. But in any case, we've got our instrument going now. We should be okay. What we're going to do is we're going to go into this gray area of my track, and I'm going to right-click. And when I do that, it's going to say Create Empty MIDI Region, Paste, Replace, Select All. I'm going to go with Create Empty MIDI Region. And what this does is it gives me just a one-measure block. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to click on the name and drag it with my mouse all the way to the beginning. Okay, I suppose I could do this project with it anywhere within the session, but it's better to put it all the way back to the beginning here just to make everything a little easier to follow along in this case. So that's the first thing we're going to do, is we're going to make sure that that is set. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this middle area here, and when I do, you'll notice that my piano roll changed. So now at the bottom I've got my MIDI region, and it's not too bad as far as being able to see what's going on, but I want to be able to see the beats a little more individually. Right now I can see beat 1, I can see measure 1, beat 3. If I go all the way over here to the slider tab, one of the things I can do is I can start zooming in a little bit, and now I can see measure 1, beat 2, measure 1, beat 3, measure 1, beat 4, and so on. All right, so now what do I need to do? Well, I need to find the correct octave here to be playing in, because these notes may not give me any sound if I'm not careful. So I'm going to literally just scroll down until I get to C1, not -1, C1. And when I click on it, there's a kick drum sound. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to place a kick drum on beats 1 and beat 3. To do that, I'm going to simply right-click and say Create Note. Now, if that's it is the correct note, that is a kick drum. But if it's wrong, I can click, I can drag it, I can move it anywhere I want, move it up or down. I can play all kinds of things, like drum kit being knocked over. Anyway, kidding aside, I want to place this on beat 1. Right there, right on my grid. I want to place on beat 3, so I'm going to click right at beat 3, Create Note, and now I have beat 1 and beat 3. When I play this, I can hear, and I can hear the click track going, so I know that I'm in line. By the way, if I want to turn the click off, it's right up here. It says click. Turn it off. You can also use the K key on your keyboard if you wish. The next thing I need to do is I need to add a snare. So I'm going to add a snare. This is the D key. Remember, C is kick, D is snare. I'm going to add that onto beats 2 and onto beats 4. Now, when I play this, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, at this point, the click really is becoming redundant because I'm on the quarter note. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to go back to the beginning here, and now I need to add some hi-hats. Now, the hi-hat is this F sharp. I'm going to place a hi-hat note on every 8th note right here. And you'll notice that everything's laying in very precisely, and this is going to be important later because if it's not, whoops, I made the wrong note there. So I'm just going to move it up to the hi-hat. If it's not precise, this becomes very difficult. And here is my basic beat now I can play. Nothing terribly exciting, but it's steady, it's consistent. If I want to change the tempo up here at the top at my counter, I can just click on it and I can roll down to slow it down. I can speed it up, I can place it wherever I want. Back at the beginning, slower. That works. If I want to add some additional notes in here just to make it a little more, I don't know, interesting, I can certainly do that. I can add notes in and to anywhere I want, really. Here is a variation. I'll move this up to that open hi-hat sound. Here is another kick drum right there. We'll put another closed hi-hat right there. And maybe, well, let's just see what that sounds like. That ain't bad. That works. Again, steady and consistent. The bigger point is, don't let this get too out of control too much where the beat is getting so complicated that you can no longer play to it. Steady, consistent with everything, and not just with drum parts. Any instrument. A kazoo, an oboe, a violin, a trumpet, a heavily distorted guitar, whatever it is, steady, consistent, be in control. Simpler is always better if it means you stay in control. Anyway, so now the thing is, one measure is cool, but we need more than a measure. So what we're going to do is back up at the top here in the MIDI region. You'll notice that, and it was popping up a little bit before, as I run the mouse over different areas of the edge, I get a couple of options here. And one of them is in the upper right corner. There's a loop icon here when I run my mouse over it. So now it's not there. Now it is. Click on that and start dragging, and you'll see that it extends my drum beat. So now I want at least 8 measures. I've got 8 measures, and when I play it, I've got my drum beat, and now I can play over top of that. If I decide to change the tempo, you'll notice that it changes the tempo for the whole thing, not just the area that where I moved it. Now it's faster. The whole thing is faster. The other thing that's kind of cool about Garageband when you loop is that if you make a change in the original loop, let's say I get rid of this note here in the original loop, notice that it actually gets rid of all of those notes. If I were to, I don't know, move this kick drum over here, it moves them in all of them. So I've actually changed the pattern for every repetition. Kind of like that. Cool. So now I have a beat is the point. It's steady, it's consistent, I can play over top of it. So now you need to add in some additional tracks because every single person in your group needs to add something on top of this drum beat that makes sense with it, but that also makes sense with each other. You may want to consider using the GEC work, something that you've got control over. Don't worry about making it too complicated. We're just trying to make sure that we can get information in that makes musical sense. So when you go up to track now, you'll go to New. If you're going to be using a USB MIDI controller like we've been talking about, use an instrument, a software instrument. If you're going to be plugging in a microphone and you have an interface plugged in, use an audio channel, the microphone. Here's one for guitar. That should get you started. Mostly, I'm just excited to hear what you guys can come up with in GarageBand for a second idea.